They did not slowly fade out. They did not wrap up a storyline. They did not get a goodbye couch or a final check-in. Andrei and Elizabeth were there, loud as ever, and then suddenly they were not. One week they were part of the noise, the next week they were gone. No announcement. No explanation. No farewell. On a franchise built on endless talking, that silence hit harder than any screaming match ever did. This was the moment everything shifted. A show that survives on chaos chose to say nothing. And when a network like 90 Day Fiancé goes quiet, it is never by accident. So ask yourself this: why would a machine that profits from mess suddenly lock its mouth shut? People noticed fast. Fans waited for a reunion mention. Nothing came. Social posts kept moving, but names stopped appearing. It felt less like a break and more like an erasure, clean and deliberate. This silence was not empty, it was loaded. What makes this uncomfortable is how normal it was treated. No chaos, no cleanup, just absence. And then absence always protects someone. Because once you stop looking at who disappeared and start looking at who stayed quiet, a different story starts to form. And that story does not start with drama. It starts with paperwork, signatures, and a number big enough to make everyone stop talking. Andrei and Elizabeth did not arrive quietly. From the start, they were built for conflict, different cultures, different tempers, and a family dynamic that felt like a live wire. Every season they showed up, you already knew the formula. Someone would raise their voice. Someone would walk out. Someone in Elizabeth's family would say the wrong thing at the wrong time. And Andrei would react exactly how you expected him to: loud, defensive, unapologetic. Over time, the fight stopped feeling shocking and started feeling familiar. The siblings arguing at the table, the tension with her father, the reunions where voices overlapped and nobody listened. You could almost set your watch by it. And yet, people kept watching. Some viewers were exhausted, others were invested. A lot of you felt both at the same time. There was comfort in knowing what chaos was coming. You knew a blow-up was around the corner, but you also knew the show would reset by next episode. That predictability turned into a strange kind of loyalty. Not because viewers loved the fighting, but because it felt consistent. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable, because predictability pays. For the network, Andrei and Elizabeth delivered. They filled episodes. They sparked online debates. They gave editors usable footage every season. Even when fans complained, they tuned in. Even when people swore they were done, they came back. That matters. Ratings matter. Familiar faces matter. Reliable conflict matters most of all. If you have watched this franchise long enough, you know how exits usually work. Someone announces a break. Someone blames mental health. Someone hints at growth. Even the messiest cast members tend to get a soft landing. Maybe a spin-off, maybe a final interview, maybe a social media goodbye. Something. Anything. That is why this disappearance feels off. Not emotional off, structural off. A couple this embedded does not normally vanish without a word. Not unless something shifted behind the scenes. Andrei was polarizing, no doubt. His behavior on screen rubbed people the wrong way. He pushed buttons. He pushed limits. But he also played his role exactly how reality television rewards. Elizabeth often became the middle ground, calming one side, appeasing the other, carrying emotional weight that never fully belonged to her. Their dynamic was messy, but it was usable. And usable people rarely disappear without a reason. Think about how many seasons the audience watched the same fights repeat. Think about how many reunions circled the same arguments. That kind of longevity does not happen by accident. It happens because producers see value. Because networks see consistency. Because advertisers see engagement. So when that pipeline stops suddenly, it creates a gap you can feel. The show keeps going, but something familiar is missing. And the absence feels louder than the presence ever did. Fans picked up on it fast. Not because anyone made a statement, but because nothing was said at all. Silence replaced noise. And noise had always been the currency here. That silence forces a hard truth. Being popular does not mean being protected. Reality television loves chaos, but only when chaos stays inside the box. Once it presses against the edges, once it threatens schedules, budgets, or control, loyalty disappears fast. Ratings buy time, not immunity. And this is the reversal most viewers never expect. The people you think are safe, the ones who feel permanent, are only safe until they are not. The silence did not arrive with a warning. No social post saying thank you for the journey. No reunion couch where unfinished arguments usually spill out. No spin-off invite dressed up as a fresh start. No carefully worded quote about growth or family time, nothing. For a franchise known for never shutting up, this quiet felt intentional. Cast exits normally follow a pattern. A pause announcement, a mutual decision story, sometimes a messy goodbye, sometimes a polite fade. Viewers get closure, even fake closure. This time, closure never showed up. Names stopped appearing. Faces stopped cycling through promos. Episodes moved forward as if a long-running chapter never existed. And that absence was not passive. That absence was a decision. Silence works differently from noise. Noise invites debate. Noise spreads blame. Silence blocks questions at the door. Silence freezes narratives before momentum forms. Silence protects power. When a network chooses silence, control sits firmly on one side of the table. Fans searched for signs. A farewell post. A cast photo missing two people. A reunion seating change. The absence stretched across weeks, then months. Still nothing. Social feeds stayed active, yet avoided the obvious. No denial, no confirmation. Silence kept winning. Silence does not happen by accident in a business built on exposure. The lack of a reunion moment said more than any argument ever did. Reunions exist to drain tension and reset storylines. When someone skips that space, something deeper blocks the door. A spin-off absence adds another layer. Those invitations usually follow value, not likability. And value had never been the issue here. Viewers who followed the franchise long enough sensed the shift. No one needed a statement. Pattern recognition did the work. Familiar exits feel messy. This one felt clean. Clean exits usually involve paperwork. Clean exits protect systems, not feelings. The silence also carried discipline. Crew members stayed quiet. Cast stayed vague. No one rushed to fill the gap with gossip. That kind of coordination rarely happens without boundaries in place. Boundaries carry consequences. Consequences discourage loose talk. What makes this unsettling is how effective the strategy proved. Without noise, rumors stayed soft. Without statements, headlines lost traction. Without visible conflict, attention drifted. Silence starved the cycle before momentum took hold. And silence reshaped memory faster than any edit ever did. Soon, new storylines filled the screen. New faces took the heat. The machine rolled forward without looking back. Viewers adjusted, though something felt unfinished. The absence lingered beneath the surface. This leads to the uncomfortable question hanging in the air at this point. When silence falls this heavy, whose safety matters more, the talent or the network? Reality television is built on a quiet contradiction. It rewards instability, but only the kind it can predict. Chaos is currency until chaos slows cameras, delays schedules, or forces real intervention. The moment volatility stops being performative and starts becoming logistical, the system tightens its grip. On screen, Andrei's volatility was loud and obvious. He argued hard, he escalated fast, he rarely backed down. That energy made scenes pop and conflicts move. It also gave the show something it could reliably package. You knew where tension would come from, and so did production. Predictable fire is manageable fire. Off-screen, pressure works differently. Long shoot days, repeated confrontations, family dynamics that do not reset when cameras turn off. None of this needs accusations to exist. It is simply the reality of filming real people inside manufactured stress loops. The audience sees minutes, the participants' live cycles. Elizabeth often became the pressure valve. On camera, she translated between sides. She softened edges. She absorbed emotional spillover that was never fully hers to carry. That role matters more than viewers realize. Mediators keep systems running. When mediators wear down, the system feels it first. And this is where empathy matters, because no one in this equation is a cartoon villain. The machine wants intensity without interruption. It wants raised voices without walk-offs. It wants emotional explosions that still hit call times. When cast behavior stays inside those lines, it gets rewarded. More seasons, more screen time, more leverage. But invisible lines exist. They are rarely written down. They show up as calendar conflicts, insurance concerns, crew discomfort, legal reviews, or conversations that never make it to air. Crossing those lines does not require bad intent. It requires pressure stacking up faster than resolution. For someone like Andrei, whose on-screen presence leaned toward confrontation, the margin for error was always thinner. Not because confrontation is banned, but because escalation is harder to contain. For someone like Elizabeth, whose role leaned toward balance, the cost of carrying that weight quietly compounds. Reality television does not break people loudly. It wears them down slowly. The system itself is not cruel in a dramatic way, it is efficient. It adjusts variables to protect momentum. If something threatens flow, it is removed or contained, not punished, not explained, simply managed. This is why silence becomes the cleanest tool. No blame needs to be assigned. No narrative needs to be defended. The machine does not argue with humans, it outlasts them. And when pressure reaches a point where someone becomes unpredictable instead of usable, the response is rarely explosive. It is quiet. Meetings happen, access shifts, calls stop coming. The audience never sees the pivot, only the absence afterward. That absence is not personal, it is procedural. What viewers often miss is how compassion and control can exist at the same time. A network can empathize with personal strain while still protecting its structure. A cast member can feel justified and still be incompatible with the system's needs. Both things can be true without anyone being evil. The tragedy, if there is one, lies in invisibility. When invisible lines are crossed, no one announces it. The people involved often cannot even explain it publicly. They just feel the door close, and once that happens, popularity stops mattering. Loyalty stops mattering, history stops mattering. All that remains is the quiet understanding that somewhere along the way, an invisible line was crossed, and the machine noticed before the audience ever did. When people imagine turning points in reality television, they picture blow-ups, ultimatums, or dramatic walk-off. In reality, the real shift happens quietly, and it happens on paper. Not dramatic paper, not scandalous documents, just language. Words that slowly stop sounding casual and start sounding careful. Early in any long-running reality relationship, the language is loose, flexible, friendly. Agreements feel conversational. Expectations feel implied. Everyone trusts momentum to carry things forward. This phase works as long as the system feels safe. Safe does not mean calm, it means predictable. As pressure builds, the language tightens. Not because anyone did something wrong, but because risk awareness increases. Clauses get longer. Emails get copied to more people. Conversations that once happened verbally start getting summarized in writing. This is not punishment. It is insulation. Corporate systems protect themselves through wording before they protect themselves through action. Viewers already understand this instinctively. You have seen it at work, when a job starts documenting everything, when HR language replaces casual check-ins, when phrases like "for clarity" and "as discussed" appear more often. Nothing explodes. But something has changed. Reality television is no different. It just happens faster. A show can tolerate conflict on screen, but it cannot tolerate ambiguity off screen. Ambiguity creates liability. Liability invites oversight. Oversight slows production. So the system responds the only way it knows how, with precision. Words start doing more work than scenes. Instead of trust, there is verification. Instead of assumption, there is confirmation. Instead of flexibility, there are boundaries. Not visible boundaries, contractual ones. This is where most viewers misread silence. Silence does not mean nothing is happening. Silence often means everything is being formalized. No one needs to leak a memo for this pattern to exist. You can feel it when tone shifts, when access changes, when spontaneity disappears. When spontaneity disappears, something upstream demanded control. This is also why public statements dry up. Public language introduces variables. Variables create misinterpretation. Misinterpretation creates exposure. Silence avoids all three. What matters here is not a single document or a dramatic clause. It is accumulation. Small wording changes stack. One clarification becomes a policy. One boundary becomes a standard. Once a standard exists, exceptions feel risky. And once exceptions feel risky, relationships quietly become transactional. At that stage, value gets measured differently. Not just by ratings or engagement, but by cost. Cost in time. Cost in coordination. Cost in unpredictability. These costs do not show up on screen, but they absolutely show up in meetings. This is why disappearance can feel sudden to viewers while feeling inevitable internally. The audience sees episodes. The system sees spreadsheets. One speaks in emotion. The other speaks in numbers, and numbers have no loyalty. They do not care how long someone has been around or how recognizable they are. They only answer one question. is this still worth it? Somewhere in this process, a number appears that reframes everything. It is not shouted, it is not leaked. It is shared quietly, maybe in a report, maybe in a budget line, maybe in a risk assessment that never leaves a room. But once that number exists, the conversation changes tone permanently. Because when numbers start outweighing narrative, the story stops being about people and starts being about protection. And the moment protection becomes the priority, decisions stop needing explanations. At some point, every mystery like this circles the same question. Not who yelled, not who offended whom, but how much. The dollar figure that floats around this situation is never confirmed, never documented publicly, and never spoken aloud by anyone involved. That is exactly why it matters. It functions less like a fact and more like a symbol, a line where curiosity turns into caution. Money changes behavior faster than drama ever could. Drama is expected. Budget overruns, legal exposure, and insurance complications are not. When a number reaches a certain scale, it does not matter whether it is real, inflated, or hypothetical. What matters is how it is perceived inside risk-focused rooms. Here's the part most viewers never see. Reality television is insured. Productions carry coverage not just for equipment, but for people, for delays, for disruptions, for anything that could halt filming or trigger claims. When potential costs cross internal thresholds, insurers start asking questions. Questions lead to reviews. Reviews lead to recommendations. Recommendations lead to shutdowns. This is why money silences faster than conflict ever will. It does not require wrongdoing. It requires exposure. If a situation begins to look expensive instead of entertaining, the response becomes immediate and quiet. Cameras pause. Access narrows. Statements stop. There are no public filings pointing to a specific amount, no lawsuits, no verified claims, and that absence is the point. When real legal processes are active, public noise becomes a liability. Silence becomes strategy. Viewers often assume that if something serious happened, evidence would surface. In reality, the opposite is often true. The more sensitive the issue, the less visible it becomes, especially when contracts and non-disclosure agreements already exist. Silence is not proof of guilt. It is proof of caution. Think about how quickly language changes once lawyers enter the room. Words get weighed, tone flattens. Emotional explanations vanish. Everything slows down. Not because someone is hiding drama, but because risk management has taken control. This is why disappearance follows money, not emotion. You can argue on camera forever. You cannot argue with insurance carriers, legal counsel, or financial oversight. Once those voices speak, storytelling stops being the priority. The rumored figure does not need to be real to be powerful. It only needs to be large enough to make decision makers uncomfortable, large enough to make silence cheaper than explanation. And once lawyers speak, cameras stop. At that point, the show no longer owns the narrative. The system shifts into protection mode. People stop being characters and start being variables. Variables get removed from equations, not debated on screen. That is the pivot most viewers never witness. The moment when entertainment hands control to legal reality, when curiosity loses to containment. And when that happens, the loudest move a network can make is to say nothing at all. The Moldova storyline aired with all the fanfare of a high-stakes relocation. Flights, new apartments, school arrangements, family debates. It was all there on camera. But even casual viewers noticed little inconsistencies. Time zones didn't always line up. School schedules raised questions. Conversations felt compressed. Things moved faster than reality would allow. Fans began whispering online, calling it fake, manufactured, or too convenient. Here's the nuance. None of that automatically means the show lied. Reality television has to condense months of life into minutes of airtime. Some edits are necessary to keep episodes watchable. But when fans catch even tiny slips, skepticism spreads quickly. It becomes part of the narrative itself, shaping perception more than actual events ever could. Andrei and Elizabeth were central to the arc. Their chaos, the arguments with family, the emotional highs and lows, they carried the storyline. But the way things appeared to move on screen didn't necessarily match the pace behind the cameras. While viewers debated whether flights were real or whether school enrollment happened that way, production teams were making decisions off screen. Contracts, legal reviews, and risk assessments don't show up on camera. They don't need dramatic flair to influence outcomes. Elizabeth's family interactions were highlighted, and Andrei's reactions dominated fan commentary. Fans got invested, choosing sides, predicting fallout, and questioning motives. It created a perfect storm of engagement, but it also had the side effect of masking real operational decisions. While viewers argued about Moldova, the real moves were happening elsewhere. That's the clever part. The on screen chaos kept attention where it was most visible, arguable, dramatic, and easily dissected by social media. Meanwhile, off camera processes quietly determined who stayed, who could appear, and who might disappear entirely. What seemed like a narrative about moving across borders was, in effect, a distraction. A well timed diversion that let the production handle sensitive issues without public scrutiny. The storyline also highlights how reality TV blends human behavior with structural control. Arguments and emotional beats are real enough to feel urgent. Yet the overall narrative is guided by decisions viewers cannot see. The Moldova arc became an engaging subplot, but it also obscured the strategic movements behind the scenes. Fans reacted, debated, and theorized, but those responses didn't alter the actual mechanics of control. It's fascinating to watch. The cast is present, fully alive, performing their roles, but the larger narrative, the part where silence, contracts, and risk converge, is invisible to the audience. This creates a dual reality. One exists on screen, loud and chaotic. The other exists off screen, calculated and quiet. And while the audience was caught up in every missed school call, every delayed flight, and every family argument, the production team had already begun implementing consequences for behavior that exceeded acceptable risk. Andrei and Elizabeth's visibility in Moldova may have felt like the focus of the story, but the real story was being written elsewhere. Fans obsessed over the timing and authenticity of Moldova, unaware that the most consequential decisions were unfolding in hidden offices, far from the cameras. The segment reframes the arc. It is not about proving fabrication. It is about understanding how perception and reality are deliberately out of sync. The chaos on screen is the visible layer. The control behind it is what shapes the ultimate outcome. And the audience, deeply engaged, becomes part of the mechanism without even realizing it. The internet lit up almost immediately after Andrei and Elizabeth stopped appearing. Reddit threads exploded with speculation. Fans dissected every frame from previous episodes, searching for signs they might have left voluntarily. Some suggested contract disputes, others hinted at off-screen drama. Instagram pages buzzed with subtle hints, likes, comments, and cryptic posts that fans pounced on, interpreting each one as a coded message. No confirmation ever came. Every unanswered question added fuel to the fire. Normally, a cast member leaving triggers statements, farewell messages, or at least an interview. Here, there was nothing. No posts, no reunion appearances, no hints dropped by other cast members. The absence itself became louder than any official word could be. People were desperate to fill the void, creating theories that ranged from the plausible to the absurd. Fans started connecting dots from previous seasons, moments that now seemed prescient. Social media speculation became a high-stakes game, with people questioning not only what had happened, but why the network would let silence dominate the narrative. Every unanswered comment, every missing post seemed like confirmation that something was being hidden. The lack of transparency transformed curiosity into obsession. Silence became the loudest statement. The scariest part is how quickly audiences accept it. When the story stops publicly, speculation doesn't die. It thrives. Fans internalize the absence, and the idea that someone can simply vanish without explanation becomes normalized. Reddit threads comparing timelines, Instagram sleuthing, and YouTube comment boards all played into the same dynamic. The more people talked, the more the disappearance gained weight and mythos. Engagement skyrocketed precisely because no one was answering. Every theory felt like a clue. Every speculation post felt urgent, and the more desperate the fans became, the more entrenched the narrative of erasure grew. Silence wasn't just avoidance, it was shaping belief. It trained the audience to expect that some stories never return, that not every question will have an answer. Fans debated consequences, imagined hidden lawsuits, or pondered network retaliation. The discourse didn't revolve around what they did wrong or right, it revolved around why the network allowed such erasure to happen. The absence itself became a spectacle, a form of narrative control that overshadowed on-screen drama. Fans began to realize the unsettling truth. If these two could vanish, anyone could. Every comment section, every thread, every post became a stage where the story lived in whispers and speculation. The community's obsession reinforced the network's quiet control, and in that vacuum, the fear grew stronger. The disappearance wasn't just a story, It became a lesson in how silence wields power. What fans thought was chaos on screen turned out to be only the visible layer. The real tension, the real pressure existed in unseen offices, legal reviews, and management decisions. The internet may have exploded, but every theory, every argument, every doubt was exactly what the network allowed to happen. Silence had trained them. Audiences now accepted the idea of total erasure as reality. And the more people talked, the deeper the myth grew. Every rumor, every fan post, every viral comment was feeding the same pattern. Reality TV had created a loop where absence spoke louder than presence, and speculation became its own reward. The network didn't need to respond, they had already won the narrative war. Fans believed they were uncovering secrets, but the truth was they were participating in the shaping of a story they would never fully see. The most unsettling lesson was clear. In reality television, silence isn't empty, it's strategic. And when executed well, it can erase anyone entirely without ever making a sound. It's easy to assume the worst when someone disappears from a show this big. But let's step back for a moment. Maybe there was no secret ban. Maybe Andrei and Elizabeth's contracts simply ended quietly. Maybe both parties agreed that stepping away was the best move. Fans often forget that reality TV operates like a business. Deals expire, schedules clash, and sometimes distance is the healthiest option for everyone involved. Even if that's the case, it doesn't erase the fact that their absence carries weight. Silence in this context isn't neutral, it communicates. Every missing post, every skipped reunion, every quiet month shapes perception. The lack of commentary or explanation forces the audience to fill the gaps. That gap becomes a narrative all its own. It shows how powerful inaction can be. In other words, even a quiet exit sends a louder signal than many public statements ever could. The curious thing is how the story changes depending on perspective. To one fan, a quiet exit feels like erasure. To another, it's just contractual normalcy. And both can be true simultaneously. The audience interprets, reacts, and debates, while the network continues to operate behind the scenes. The control exerted doesn't need drama or headlines. It functions perfectly through absence and perception. Even when nothing dramatic appears on the surface, control never looks dramatic. And that's the lesson that gets overlooked. Whether it was an enforced silence, a mutual decision, or a contractual conclusion, the narrative power comes from the choice to remain quiet. It shapes audience beliefs, fuels speculation, and maintains authority without a single public confrontation. Reality TV doesn't always need explosive exits to assert influence. Sometimes, the most effective moves are invisible. Fans can argue over intent, over fairness, and over truth, but the result is the same. Andrei and Elizabeth are gone, and the network's narrative remains unchallenged. The quiet exit still controls the conversation, still drives discussion, and still holds everyone's attention. And the audience, knowingly or not, participates in that structure by seeking answers where none are given. The real takeaway isn't whether someone was banned or chose to leave. The takeaway is how absence itself becomes a tool. And the more people analyze, speculate, and obsess, the more power shifts to whoever controls the silence. No dramatic scene, no headline, no public statement, just a simple fact. Silence can do everything a scandal would do, but with more subtlety and far less risk. Control never needs to scream to be heard. When you step back, it becomes clear this story isn't really about Andrei or Elizabeth. They are a lens, a case study, a way to understand something far bigger. Reality TV thrives on drama, unpredictability, and chaos, but only as long as it serves the system. Once that chaos threatens legal trouble, financial exposure, or public scrutiny, the system reacts. And it doesn't react with speeches, interviews, or teary public statements. It reacts with erasure. Networks survive by cutting threads clean. They protect themselves first, then the story, and sometimes even the cast, but always on their own terms. Contracts, insurance, lawyers, and internal risk assessments quietly dictate what the audience never sees. The cameras might roll for weeks on tense arguments, family drama, or international moves, but once someone becomes a liability, the narrative ends, and their presence is quietly removed. No finale, no send-off, no fanfare. The story continues, but the people who created the tension are gone. This brings the mind back to that opening moment, the shock of vanishing without explanation. It wasn't a glitch or bad timing, it was intentional. Silence itself is the loudest move in reality television. And when stars disappear this cleanly, it forces a chilling thought. How many other conflicts, scandals, or explosive personalities never reached air? How much of what we see, curated chaos, and how much is carefully contained risk? The reality is unsettling. The system rewards drama, but it eliminates risk. And the audience, eager for answers, becomes part of the machine that rewards the very silence that hides the truth. Every missing reunion, every skipped post, every unexplained absence is a lesson in control, authority, and quiet power. Andrei and Elizabeth are gone. Their story ended without fanfare, yet it tells more about the machinery behind the cameras than anything aired ever could. If you thought reality TV was about authenticity or transparency, think again. The most critical moves happen where no lens points, in the quiet decisions that shape what the world eventually sees. If stars can vanish this cleanly, what else never reached air? Remember that first shock, the moment Andrei and Elizabeth simply vanished? No announcement, no farewell, no explanation. That silence wasn't a mistake. It wasn't oversight. It was a lesson in control. Networks don't always respond with drama or headlines. Sometimes the quietest move carries the loudest message. It shows who holds the power, who decides what stories continue, and whose presence is deemed too risky to display. For viewers, it's unsettling. We crave closure, updates, and explanations. But here, absence became the signal. Watching the chaos unfold while knowing the system can erase it entirely reframes the way we see every reunion, argument, and on-screen meltdown. Silence isn't empty, it's deliberate. And it teaches the audience more about authority and control than any on-screen fight ever could. The story of Andrei and Elizabeth ends here, but the pattern doesn't. There are other couples, other moments, where the cameras stopped capturing exactly when tension escalated, and fans were left questioning what really happened behind the scenes. The questions linger, the theories multiply, and the system stays quietly in control. Next, we'll look at another pair whose sudden quiet left everyone guessing, and the truth behind their silence might shock you even more.